Religion in ancient China. Religious practices in ancient China date back over 7,000 years. Long before the teachings of Confucius, Lao Tzu, or Buddha influenced China, people worshipped personifications of nature and later concepts like wealth and fortune, which gradually evolved into a structured religion. These early beliefs continue to influence religious practices today. For example, Taoism's Tao Te Ching speaks of a universal force, the Tao, flowing through and connecting all things without mentioning specific gods. Yet, modern Taoists in China and elsewhere still worship various gods, a tradition rooted in the country's ancient past. Historian Harold M. Tanner notes, the gods, spirits, and ancestors could affect crops, the weather, childbirth, the king's health, warfare, and so on. It was, therefore, important to sacrifice to them. These gods arose from people's observations of natural forces, which either frightened or reassured them, prompting rituals to honor and appease the deities. Over time, these beliefs became formalized, with gods gaining names and personalities, ultimately shaping the early structure of religion in China, much like in other ancient civilizations. Early signs of religious practice in China are evident in the Yangshao culture of the Yellow River Valley, 5000 to 3000 BC. At the Neolithic Banpo village site, circa 4500 to 3750 BC, in Shangti province, 250 tombs were discovered with grave goods, suggesting a belief in life after death. Burial practices, such as tombs oriented west to east symbolizing death and rebirth, provide further evidence of early religious observance. The Yangshao culture was matrilineal, implying that a female priest likely led rituals, as indicated by the grave goods. Scholars believe early religious practices were likely animistic, with feminine deities seen as benevolent, while male deities were more feared. These practices persisted in the Qijia culture, circa 2200 to 1600 BCE, of the upper Yellow River Valley, which may have been patriarchal. The Bronze Age site of Leijia village in modern Qinghai province, often dubbed the Chinese Pompeii, was destroyed by an earthquake and mudslides, preserving artifacts intact. Among these artifacts was a bowl of noodles, believed to be the oldest in the world and a precursor to long-life noodles. While not all scholars agree China invented the noodle, evidence from Leijia supports the existence of religious practices as early as c. 2200 BCE, including worship of a supreme god overseeing many lesser deities. Ghosts and religion. By the time of the Shang dynasty, 1600 to 1046 BCE, religious beliefs had developed to include a king of the gods, named Shangti, along with many lesser deities. Shangti oversaw important state matters and was rarely sacrificed to, as people were discouraged from bothering him with their problems. Ancestor worship may have begun around this time, though it likely started earlier. Evidence of strong belief in ghosts, including amulets and charms, dates back to at least the Shang dynasty, with ghost stories being among the earliest forms of Chinese literature. Ghosts, known as Gei or Kei, were spirits of the deceased who hadn't received proper burial rites or remained tied to the earth for other reasons. In some cases, these spirits appeared as jiangshi, stiff body, similar to zombies. Ghosts have played a significant role in Chinese religion and culture and continue to do so. Tomb Sweeping Day, observed around April 4th, is a ritual still practiced today to honor the dead and ensure they are content in the afterlife. If the dead are unhappy, they are believed to return and haunt the living. During the Festival of Qingming, the Chinese visit their ancestors' graves to tend to them and pay respects, even if they don't do so at any other time of year. When someone died naturally or was buried with the proper honors, there was no fear of their return as a ghost. The Chinese believed that those who lived good lives joined the gods after death. These ancestor spirits were prayed to, so they could approach Shangti on behalf of the living. Tanner explains, ancestors were represented by a physical symbol, like a spirit tablet engraved with the ancestor's honorific name. Rituals honored these ancestors, and sacrifices of millet ale, cattle, dogs, sheep, and humans were offered. The scale of sacrifices varied, but major rituals involved hundreds of animals or human offerings. The Shang elite believed the dead continued to exist and influence the world of the living, so they buried their dead in elaborate, well-furnished tombs. These ancestor spirits could aid the living by revealing the future. Divination became a central aspect of Chinese religious belief, performed by mystics, similar to modern-day psychics, who were paid to predict the future using oracle bones. It was through these oracle bones that writing developed in China. The mystic would write a question on an ox's shoulder bone or a turtle shell, apply heat until it cracked, and interpret the crack's direction for the answer. The ancestors, not the mystic or the bone, provided the answer through communion with the gods who controlled the universe. The gods. Over 200 gods were recorded in the Chinese pantheon during and after the Shang dynasty. Early gods, before Shangti, were spirits of a place called Tudigong, Lord of the Place, or Earth God, inhabiting specific areas and holding power only there. These earth spirits were often ancient and could either protect or seek vengeance depending on how they were treated. Tudigong may have sometimes been the spirit of a deceased community leader who remained a guardian in spirit. The concept of feng shui originated from the belief in Tudigong. Local earth spirits continued to be venerated even after the rise of more universal gods. One of the earliest deities, likely a local spirit, was the dragon. Dragon imagery has been found on Neolithic pottery from Banpo village and other sites. The Dragon King, known as Yinglong, was the god of rain, responsible for both gentle rains and devastating storms. Yinglong was also the lord of the sea and a protector of kings and heroes. Dragon statues and imagery are commonly used in Chinese art and architecture to symbolize protection and success. Nuwa, the goddess of humankind, likely existed as early as the Shang dynasty. She was part woman, part dragon, and created humans by molding them from the mud of the Yellow River and breathing life into them. Eventually, she grew tired of the task and invented marriage so people could reproduce on their own. Nuwa then enlisted the help of her friend Fuxi. Fuxi, the god of fire, taught humans how to control fire for cooking, warmth, and light. He also wove the first fishing nets, teaching people how to fish. Once their basic needs were met, he gave them the gifts of music, writing, and divination. Nuwa and Fuxi were considered the parents of humanity and were invoked for protection. Sun Wukong, the monkey god of mischief, caused so much trouble that the other gods killed him and sent him to the underworld. However, Sun Wukong erased his name from the book of the king of the underworld, came back to life, and could no longer die. Though his name developed later, a mischievous monkey god appears on Shang dynasty bronze inscriptions and is believed to be Sun Wukong. Lei Shen, the god of thunder, was notoriously ill-tempered and would beat on a large drum with a hammer when irritated. He despised anyone who wasted food and would hurl thunderbolts to kill them. On one occasion, Lei Shen saw a woman about to discard a bowl of rice and struck her dead. The gods later decided he had acted too hastily, so the woman, Dian Mu, was resurrected and became the goddess of lightning. Her role was to flash light and guide Lei Shen so he would aim his thunderbolts accurately. Above all these gods was Shangti, the god of law, order, justice, and life, known as the Lord on High. Shangti oversaw the workings of the universe and the lives of all people, especially rulers. He determined who should rule, for how long, and who would succeed them. Worship and clergy. Chinese temples and shrines were maintained by male priests and monks. Although women could enter monasteries to serve the gods, they were not permitted to hold spiritual authority over men. Various religious services were conducted in temples depending on the belief system, but they all shared the common element of music, often the sound of bells. Monastic prayers took place 3 times daily, morning, noon, and night, accompanied by the ringing of a small bell. Incense was regularly burned during services to purify the space from evil spirits and negative energies. A significant aspect of Chinese religion, be it Taoism, Confucianism, or Buddhism, was the concept of hygiene schools, which taught people how to care for themselves to live longer lives or even achieve immortality. These schools were often part of the temple or monastery, where priests taught healthy eating, exercise, from which Tai Chi evolved, and rituals to honor the gods, who would then bless people with long, healthy lives. Further religious developments during the Zhou dynasty, 1046 to 226 BCE, the concept of the mandate of heaven was introduced. This belief held that Shangti granted the right to rule to a specific emperor or dynasty, which would continue to reign as long as they pleased him. If the rulers failed in their duties, they were said to lose the mandate of heaven and would be replaced. Modern scholars view this as a way to justify regime changes, but at the time, people fully believed in the idea. The gods were believed to watch over the people, especially the emperor. A practice that began near the end of the Shang dynasty continued, wearing charms or amulets of one's chosen god or ancestor for protection and blessings. The emperor also followed this tradition. Although religious practices shifted in the latter part of the Zhou dynasty, the wearing of religious jewelry persisted. The Zhou dynasty is divided into two phases: Western Zhou, 1046 to 771 BCE, and Eastern Zhou, 771 to 226 BCE. While religious practices flourished during the Western Zhou, they began to wane during the Eastern Zhou. Although ancestor worship, divination, and reverence for the gods continued, philosophical ideas during the Spring and Autumn period, 772 to 476 BC, began to challenge older beliefs. Confucius, 551 to 479 BCE, promoted ancestor worship as a way to honor one's heritage, yet he stressed individual responsibility and was critical of relying too much on supernatural forces. Mencius, 372 to 289 BC, expanded on Confucian ideas, fostering a more rational worldview. Although Lao Tzu, 500 BC, is often credited with founding Taoism, it is more likely that Taoism evolved from ancient folk religions rather than being the creation of a 6th century BC philosopher. Therefore, Confucian rationalism likely developed in response to the emotional and spiritual aspects of earlier beliefs. Religious thought evolved further during the Warring States period, 476 to 221 BCE, a chaotic era in which the Zhou had lost the mandate of heaven, and 7 independent states fought for control of China. Confucianism was the dominant belief system, but another philosophy was gaining traction: legalism. A statesman from the region of Qing, Xiangyang, d. 338 BCE, developed legalism, which argued that humans were inherently selfish and evil and needed strict laws to be controlled. This philosophy enabled the Qin to conquer the other states and establish the Qing dynasty under the first emperor, Shi Huangdi, in 221 BC. Religion banned and revived during the Qing dynasty, 221 to 206 BCE, Shi Huangdi outlawed religion and ordered the burning of philosophical and religious texts. Legalism became the official doctrine, and harsh penalties were imposed for even minor infractions. While Shi Huangdi banned most books, particularly those unrelated to his dynasty or legalism, he privately amassed works on immortality and the afterlife, subjects in which he was deeply interested. Confucian scholars hid their books, and people continued to worship their gods in secret, though amulets and religious charms were forbidden. Shi Huangdi died in 210 BCE while searching for immortality during a journey through his kingdom. The Qin dynasty quickly collapsed, and the Han dynasty, 202 BC, 220 CE, succeeded it. Although the early Han rulers adhered to legalism, this changed under Emperor Wu, 141 to 87 BCE, who embraced Confucianism as the state religion. Other belief systems, like Taoism, also persisted. In the Han dynasty, the emperor was viewed as a mediator between the gods and the people. Although the emperor's connection to the gods had been acknowledged through the mandate of heaven since the early Zhou dynasty, his role now explicitly included ensuring heaven's favor upon the people. Mount Tai became an important sacred site, and ancient rituals, like the Festival of the 5 Elements, earth, fire, metal, water, and wood, were revised and renamed the Festival of Heaven and Earth to emphasize the people's connection with the gods. An influential religious movement during this time was the cult of Shi Wang Mu, the Queen Mother of the West, goddess of immortality. She resided in a golden palace in the Kunlun Mountains, surrounded by a moat so sensitive that even a hair falling into it would sink. She wandered daily through her imperial peach orchard, whose fruit granted immortality. According to scholar Patricia Buckley Ebry, during the Han period, the hope for deathlessness or immortality found expression in the cult of a goddess called the Queen Mother of the West. Her paradise was portrayed as a land of marvels where trees of deathlessness grew and rivers of immortality flowed. People of all social levels expressed their devotion to her, and shrines were erected under government sponsorship throughout the country. Shi Huangmu was depicted as either an elderly, unattractive woman with tiger-like teeth and a hunched back, or a beautiful, long-haired woman. Though she zealously guarded the secrets of immortality and would strike down anyone who tried to enter her garden, she blessed her followers as long as they pleased her. The arrival of Buddhism. In the 1st century CE, Buddhism reached China via trade routes along the Silk Road. According to legend, the Han Emperor Ming, r. 28–75 c., had a vision of a golden deity soaring through the sky and asked his secretary about it. The secretary mentioned a god from India who glowed like the sun and could fly, prompting Ming to send emissaries to bring Buddhist teachings to China. Buddhism quickly merged with the local folk religion, incorporating ancestor worship and veneration of Buddha as a deity. Buddhism was embraced in China and became one of the key spiritual influences alongside Confucianism, Taoism, and folk beliefs. When the Han Dynasty collapsed, China entered the Three Kingdoms period, 220 to 263 CE, marked by violence and disorder similar to the earlier warring states. The chaos of the time shaped Buddhism in China, leading to the development of transcendence-focused rituals and practices. It was during this period that schools like Chan, later known as Zen, and Pure Land Buddhism took shape. Buddhism also introduced a new type of ghost to Chinese culture, the Igui, hungry ghost, which became a source of fear. The modern ghost festival in China, also called the Hungry Ghost Festival, is rooted in this belief. Hungry ghosts were spirits of those who had been murdered, improperly buried, or had sinned without redemption. They could also be individuals who were never content in life and remained unsatisfied in death. To appease them, people left food out during Ghost Month and offered sacrifices at ancestors' graves to prevent them from becoming hungry ghosts. The Tang Dynasty and religion in China. By the time of the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907 CE, the major religious influences on Chinese culture were established, but more were to come. The second emperor, Taizong, 626 to 649 CE, was a Buddhist who promoted religious tolerance, allowing Manichaeism, Christianity, and other faiths to establish communities in China. His successor, Wu Zetian, r. 690 to 704 CE, elevated Buddhism and presented herself as a Maitreya, future Buddha, while her successor, Xuanzong, r. 712 to 756 CE, rejected Buddhism and made Taoism the state religion. Though Xuanzong encouraged freedom of worship, by 817 CE Buddhism was criticized as a divisive force that threatened traditional values. Between 842 to 845 CE, Buddhist nuns and priests faced persecution, temples were closed, and all religions except Taoism were banned. These actions also affected Jewish, Christian, and other religious communities. However, Emperor Xuanzong II, r. 846 to 859 CE, ended the persecutions and reinstated religious tolerance. Subsequent dynasties, up to the present day, experienced their own developments in religion, but by the end of the Tang Dynasty, the main religious framework was already in place. Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism, and early folk religion formed the foundation of Chinese culture. Although other faiths contributed additional influences, these four were the most significant. Religion has always been deeply important to the Chinese, even though the People's Republic of China initially banned it after taking power in 1949 CE. The People's Republic viewed religion as divisive and unnecessary, and during the Cultural Revolution, temples and churches were destroyed or repurposed for secular use. In the 1970s, the government relaxed its stance on religion, recognizing it as psychologically hygienic and beneficial for social stability, and began to encourage organized religion as a positive influence in people's lives.